In this Gold Belt video, I'm going to cover how to start web tests in all 4 languages. I'll start with C#, we'll just go alphabetically. So C#, Java, JavaScript, then Python. So we're going to go through all 4 languages and again, how to start a test against a web application. This is going to be very similar in web services as well, but I'll do that as a separate video. So web applications, I'll start with C# here. I've got the solution open. What we need to do, there is no test project. We need to figure out how to test this web application project here. We've got controllers, the home controller. We've got our views. These are the actual pages, the CS/HTML pages that we need to test. In order to do these tests, ideally we like to do this as though the browser were making the request. And that's what I'm going to be covering in each language. So starting with C#, let's go ahead and start with just adding a test project. And you can use any test framework you want. It does not matter. I've got JUnit and MSTest that I've used recently. I'll just use an MSTest project. I'll call this acceptance tests. And just use the standards. All right, let's go and rename this to, we're doing physician searching, so I'll say physician search tests. We'll rename this method physician search success for now. We're just getting it started. There's a lot more we're going to need to do later on around database interaction and other things. But for now, we're just trying to get it to make a web request across the wire over to the web page. Now I'm going to need, in the C# world, I'm going to need acceptance tests to know about web app. What we're going to end up doing is using a class called Web Application Factory that will host the web application in a separate process domain so we can make requests to it. So in order to do that, I really need this program CS file here. That's what needs to be referenced up in the acceptance test. So I'll add a project reference to web app so that we know about the types in web app. In addition, I'm also going to need to access program CS. Now there's a couple of ways to do this. One is, so this is just the straight main method format. You can convert it to program main style. That is one way to go. And it basically just turns it back into a class. And what you would do is you would just change this to a public class. So that's one way you can do this. The other way is we can rely on partial classes. So leaving it as just one big block of code, at the end I can do a public partial class program. And the partial means that it combines this declaration with the previous declaration. And this declaration is adding the public keyword. So either one of those works. You can either, again, convert it to a full program CS file, make it public, or just add this public partial class program at the bottom. That'll do the same thing. Now that I have that, the other thing I'm going to need to do is install a NuGet package. Now, I never remember the name of the NuGet package, so I'm just going to start typing, and General Visual Studio will help me. So here inside the test method itself, we're going to start creating this web application factory. So I'll say using var, and it's using because it is disposable. So web application factory equals new web application factory. And once I get it typed out, it's going to help me. It's going to say, hey, I think you mean this package, and that's the one we want. So Microsoft.ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core.MVC.Testing. And I can either use the or the package manager, NuGet package manager, and do it, or in my case, I'm just going to say use whatever's the latest. So I'll find and install the latest version. That'll add that in. And then this wants the class that is the entry point for the web application. This is our program CS file. Now, when you pull this up, you'll notice there are 2 programs here, and there may be more in your particular case. Make sure you're choosing the one that is the class that we created. This second one here is actually in the Microsoft Visual Studio Test Platform test host namespace. That is not our class. Our class happens to be unnamespaced. It's this top one here that we happen to want. Now that we've got that, I can make a web request, so I will create an HTTP client. Create client, there we go. And now I can make a request. So we'll say using var response equals HTTP client. We will do a get. We're going to do it. So these are all async methods. We're going to do the home page. So let's just see if we can get to the home page. Get a waiter, get result. I don't want to worry about async. And let's just make sure it is success. All right, so I've got all that up and ready to go. Let's go ahead and run our test real fast. And we have a success. So that looks like it's working. Let's confirm. Let's do a URL that doesn't exist. How about /nope? And we get a failure, we get a 404, that does not exist. So this is working. This is actually making the web request and getting what we want back. So again, we have to make the program CS file public. So a couple different ways to do that. We'll create our test project, add a reference to web app, create the web application factory, you'll need this, this package. So make sure to install that through NuGet. And then once that's done, we'll create a client, get the response, and then ensure success. So that's it on C#. Let's switch over. We're going to do Java next. So let me close this down, go back a couple, and we're going to the Java code. I'll zoom in a little bit. All right, so in the Java world, things are a little bit different. In Java, the testing framework is all included as a part of Java. So JUnit is shipped along for the ride. And JUnit with Spring, which is the primary web framework I'm using for most of the exercises, it provides some additional classes and types that we can use. So those types, unfortunately, they vary from Spring framework as well as from JUnit framework. So what I'm going to show you is one of the later versions of Spring combined with JUnit. If the attributes in the classes I'm showing don't work, you'll probably need to either get Copilot to help you out, maybe ChatGPT or Grok to help you out, because it's possible you're running different versions and it needs different attributes. So I'm going to use the test in the web app project. We'll open up source, test, and Java, and there was already one baked in. This was already created, and it just so happens, I believe it's the right methods and classes that we want. But I want to walk through these real fast. So ignore the imports for now. I want to focus just on the code. First off, you'll need this @extend_with. This attribute is different between JUnit 4 and JUnit 5. This is the JUnit 5 version. So @extend_with, and then we want the Spring extension.class, so the class of Spring extension. We're going to say that this is a Spring Boot test, and we want to use this @autoconfigure mock MVC. So these attributes are required. This autoconfigure mock MVC configures this auto-wired mock MVC object. So these attributes, these decorators, are basically their instructions, kind of boot up instructions for JUnit to be able to test Spring the same way, where we're making web requests almost as if it's across the wire. So @autowired needs to be on this mock MVC object. You can call this anything you want. I can call this web proxy or test client or browser emulator. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't really matter what the name of this is. What does matter is that the type is this mock MVC class, and it has this auto-wired attribute as well. So these are the critical things. Once that's all set up, I can use the mock MVC to perform a get, a post, a patch, whatever it is I need to do. In this case, it's just doing a simple / that's going to do the home page. So let's run this test. And we get a pass. So that is succeeding. Let's confirm. Again, we'll do /nope to a URL I know does not exist. And we get our 404. So that's it. So again, a lot going on. Again, these attributes, these are very specific to this version of Spring and this version of JUnit, which is JUnit 5. It's also called Jupyter. It's the later version of JUnit. So these are the different attributes and objects that I want to do. So lines 14 through 19, this is the critical piece. This particular project just happened to have the right attributes, which is great. But there are definitely some projects that I've created that don't have the right attributes. And so you have to play with that to find the exact right combination of attributes that are going to work for you. So that's it on the Java side. So let's switch gears. We're going to go to JavaScript. This particular JavaScript application, I believe, is an Angular application. So let's look into it. Pull this back over, zoom in a little. There we go. All right, so in JavaScript applications, so this is going to be true for Vue, Angular, and React. So all three of these, what we're looking to do is use a web test framework. And we can see in the README here, there's some instructions specifically on Angular. These are going to be similar for the others. I'm going to use Cypress. I'm going to show you how to install and use Cypress. I really like Cypress. I think it's a really solid framework. It's really nice. It's great for end-to-end testing. There are several other frameworks out there. You're welcome to explore. In fact, I encourage you to explore and use others. Not everybody uses Cypress, so it is important to understand that you may be good with Cypress, but that doesn't mean you're going to know what you need for another company. So we'll start off, we need to do our install. So we'll do npm i -- legacy peer deps. This legacy peer deps is required for all installs for Angular. I wish it weren't, but it is. So we have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to run into an error. So if you just do npm i, you'll probably see a bunch of errors. And that's why you need the legacy peer deps. There's also a force command you might be able to do as well. So this is going to run, install that. That's good. So now we could do npm start. I'm going to skip that because I'm pretty sure this is going to work. The next thing we want to do is we actually want to start installing Cypress. We want to get Cypress set up. So this is kind of like adding the test project or the test code. In Angular, React, and Vue, we do that specifically through the testing framework we're going to be using rather than just creating a test folder. So let me start off. We're going to install Cypress. So we'll do Cypress and then -- We're only needing this for development. So I'll do save dev and then legacy here, deps, if I can type. All right, so this sometimes takes a little bit of time. It's a lot to download. It's a lot to install. Cypress isn't exactly lightweight, but it is incredibly powerful. So this is going to get everything installed for me. Once this is done, actually, that took way less time than I thought. It might take a little longer on yours. So now that that's done, what we need to do is we need to run Cypress once. And what that's going to do is that's going to initialize all the files for us. So we'll close it, we'll change a few things, and then we'll run it again. So I'll do npx cypress open. So npx is for executing node packages. npm is for running a module. In that case, it's the install. So npx, we're going to execute the Cypress, and we're going to open Cypress. So we're going to run this. It may prompt you a couple of times, just say allow. This is going to open up the Cypress runner. It may give you a little confirmation, just say continue. We want end-to-end testing. You could do component testing. Some people like component testing. I'm a fan of end-to-end testing because it tests the application the way the user would actually use it. To me, that's the right way to test. So I'm going to do end-to-end testing. And then it says, hey, I just created all this stuff. Hit continue. And once that's done, it's going to ask you for a browser. Once we get there, we're done for now. We'll come back to this in a moment. I'm just going to go ahead and close Cypress. And you'll notice it's created a Cypress folder and a Cypress config file. So a couple things we need to do. First off, Cypress config, we need to set our end-to-end base URL. There we go, base URL, and this will be HTTP for Angular. This is localhost 4200. So that's the default for Angular applications. React is going to be a little different. Vue is going to be a little different. So you'll have to see what that is. If you're not sure, you can run the serve command or the run command and see what opens up in a browser. So I could do ng-serve here and open it up, but it happens to be 4200. So you'll need to get that URL of the port number, make sure you understand what that is, and add that to the Cypress config file here so that it knows the base URL. The next thing we need to do is actually create an end-to-end test. So in the Cypress folder, I'm going to create a new folder, E2E. And then new file, we're going to do physician search.cy.ts. This is a TypeScript file. So we'll describe physician search. And I don't want before each, so we'll do an it. Sure, doesn't really matter. I just need something here so that we've got a placeholder. All right, so now that we've got this up and running, what we're going to do is we're going to do something really basic. We want to go into the application, and we're just going to see if we can get the web request to work. So inside source, if I look under app and index, it's basically pulling in my app root. By default, this is going to open up my physician search. So let me open up the physician search component, and I'm just going to see if I can find some text. We'll do find a physician now. So I just want to make sure this text exists on the page. So we'll say cy.visit, yep, and then cy.get. Let's do contains. So we'll just make sure the page, when it loads up, says find a position now somewhere on the page. This is a hello world test. This is not a great test. But again, I'm just trying to make sure I get the test framework up and running. So let's go ahead and run this real fast. So we'll do ng-serve. So the server has to be actually running and serving up the web application. So we'll run ng-serve. And again, first time I'm doing this, this may take a little time. I'm going to go and do a split terminal here because I'm going to need two commands running at the same time. So that is up and running. There we go. So you'll notice again, HTTP localhost 4200. So that's how I know it was 4200. So if you weren't sure, you could do ng-serve and it'll tell you that right there. That's what goes into your Cypress config value here. So these need to be the same. Now that I've got that, I can run npx cypress open again. We are doing our end-to-end testing. Choose whatever browser you want. It doesn't really matter. I'll just use Chrome for now. It's going to pull up here's the specs. I want to run the physician search specs. And let's see if I did everything correctly. There it goes. And it looks good. So it's visiting the home page. It sees find a position now. What's nice about Cypress is you can actually see what the web page looks like each step along the way. So it'll tell you what it's doing and where it found it, what all that looks like. You'll get a little screen captures of what the application looked like at each point in the steps there. So again, just to make sure we understand that this does work, we'll say nope. And nope does not pull that up. There is no web page, so we don't see the content that, for which we're looking. So that's what we've got going on with Cypress. Again, a few different steps. So just to review those real fast, once we do our regular npm install, right, we get that up and running, then we'll need to add Cypress. So npm I or npm install Cypress. I did save dev because I only need it for dev. And with Angular, you need force legacy deps, although you shouldn't need that for React and Vue. It would just be the save dev. So install Cypress, then run Cypress once to generate the folders and files that you're going to need. Once that's up and running, then we'll configure the base URL in the Cypress config, add our test, and then we're off to the races. All right, last one, we're going to do Python really fast. So Python turns out to be probably the easiest of them because most of the web frameworks in Python actually ship with a test client baked in. So that's kind of nice. This particular application, we'll need to see what it's using. We are using Flask. So we're going to use the Flask one. There's also one built in for Fast API, Django. There's several different web frameworks out there, and they all kind of come with their own test client, which makes it really, really nice. So we'll start off. We need to install our environment command. I'm going to use the built-in venv tool. You can use a different one if you'd like. So I'll do pym venv, that's the tool, and I want it to be in the .venv folder. So it's going to create this .venv folder here in the solution. It's going to ask, hey, we see a namespace or a workspace. You want to use that? I'll say yes. That's going to basically resolve the dependency problems we see with the yellow over here with the warnings. So now that we've got that, we need to activate it. So go to the venv folder, the scripts folder, and run the activate script. And you'll notice now it says green venv. So now we're in the virtual environment folder. Now we're ready to run our install. So we'll install -r requirements.txt. All right, everything is up and running there. And just to make sure that that resolves, we'll give it a moment. There it goes. All right, so perfect. So let's go ahead and create our test. Create a new folder, test. Create a new file, test, position search. And I'm going to use pytest. So we'll do pip install pytest. All right, so now we're using pytest. We'll do def test position search success. Again, I'm just trying to get it up and running. So in the Flask world, and again, this is going to be very similar for Fast API as well as others, what I need is the main object that's using Flask. So looking for Flask down here, it's the position search web. So that's the object I need. So we'll import that. So from app.main, import, I don't have an S, so I apparently misspelled physician search web. All right, so we're going to import the physician search web. Now that I've got that, basically, and it's going to help me out. So we'll say our client is physician search web test client. So test client is a method that ships with Flask. And again, most of the frameworks have this. So that pulls back. So now I can say response equals client dot. We'll just do a get again to the home page, and let's assert that the response status code is 200. So let's go ahead and run this. I'll go and run it through the test runner here. And we have a success. And again, let's just make sure we understand how that works. If we say nope, we get a 404. It does not exist. And so we're off to the races. So that's basically how to do that. That is setting up the test. Now that you've done that, you can make requests to the specific web pages. You can do puts, you can do posts, you can do gets, you can submit data, whatever you need to do. But in all 4 languages, we've now seen how to get that test started.